Alright guys, so for today's video, the topic is going to be, this is how it's supposed to work. And the reason I say that is because I'm talking about unconstitutional laws and edicts, rulings, whatever you have it. And one of the questions that I'm often asked as a police officer is, will you enforce an unconstitutional law? And that's actually a very complicated question. You know, it's not as easy as you might think, because if something is to become law and get to the point where it's actually enforceable, will I enforce it? Will I be the arbiter of what is and what is not constitutional? And the argument that I often make to people is that you don't want police officers deciding what is constitutional. You know, our system of government has a series of checks and balances that are set up, and that is where this decision is made. And you don't want police officers on the street doing that. And right now, the story that I have for you is going to be one that shows exactly why I say that and how the system is supposed to work. And it's a case where the system absolutely has worked. So what we're talking about today is the governor of New Mexico, who thought that she could just unilaterally, by executive order, ban guns in public places because she's an absolute moron. It was last Friday. I don't know what day that was of the week. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Whatever day it was, I'm pretty sure it was last Friday. The governor of New Mexico came out and gave this press conference where she said she's suspending concealed carry permits and open carry in counties larger than a certain population in New Mexico. And you know, really what she was trying to do is say Albuquerque has a violence problem. She thinks it's a gun violence problem. So she thinks that by telling law-abiding citizens that you can't conceal carry in public, that's going to stop people from murdering each other. It's absolutely asinine. It's a stupid idea on its face, but it's also unbelievable that she thought she had the power and authority to do that. A couple of reasons why she thought she had the power and the authority to do that is because one thing that started happening in 2020 and is continuing to go on with some of these idiot pea-brain left-wing politicians is that they think they can basically do anything they want as long as they do it in the name of a public health crisis. The reason they have this belief is because of what happened with COVID. There were a lot of politicians in governments, this is on the right and the left, that when COVID happened, they thought they had the authority to issue a public health order demanding that private people do certain things. They closed down people's businesses. They told you what stores you're allowed to go to, what products you're allowed to buy in the store. Like the governor of New York or of Michigan, was it? They made it so that you could only buy essentials. So like you could go to the grocery store and buy food, but there was stuff right next to the food, like gardening tools and stuff like that you were not allowed to have. And, you know, during COVID, a lot of people had to stay home. They couldn't go to work. Their places of business shut down. There was nothing to do, so they wanted to go outside and garden, but they weren't allowed to use gardening tools because COVID. This demonstrates like the overreach of these public health orders, but that's what she was trying to use to ban guns in public. Now, this was something that I saw initially. I made a post about it. I've got my post. I think I have it pulled up right here. And this was me simply responding to the headline, you know, said, oh, a bunch of Second Amendment activists are about to get paid in New Mexico. The reason I said this is because at the time, I thought that this was going to carry the weight of law and that police officers are going to be forced to go out and enforce this law. And some people were going to kind of force the issue. They're going to cause themselves to get arrested. They were going to sue the government, make a lot of money, and then this law was going to get overturned. Little did I know this did not actually have the power of law. And this is kind of where we're going with this, because I'm talking about this is the way the system is supposed to work. This never had the power of law. So no police officers were ever asked to enforce this executive order. And it goes back to the question of, you know, would you ever enforce a law that was unconstitutional? One of my answers to that is something should never, if it's unconstitutional, it should never get to the point where I am asked as a police officer to enforce it. I've seen a couple of laws like this come about recently. This one was an executive order, so it's a little bit different. But I've actually seen some, like in the city of Columbus, the city council passed an ordinance banning magazines, 30-round magazines, and making a law that you have to have firearms locked up in a safe in your home. These laws were stopped by the court process, so it never got to the point where police officers were asked to enforce these laws. And that's actually something very similar to what happened here in New Mexico. That's why I'm saying the system is working. I wanted to give a shout out real quick to my buddy Dan Carr over at Police Law News. He lives in New Mexico. I think he's a police officer, an active police officer in New Mexico. He runs an Instagram page, which you can see right here is a very good Instagram page. He makes a lot of like short videos that are very informative, very concise, right to the point. Does a really good job with his content. He also has a Substack, and he posted this on Twitter. I follow his Twitter as well. And this actually informed me like the day after this went into effect. So I think it was September 8th that it came into effect. So on September 9th, he wrote this Substack article. And basically what the article says is that this does not have the weight of law. This is a civil penalty, and she was using emergency health order. So police officers are not going to be asked to enforce this. They don't have the authority to enforce it, that kind of stuff. So that does change things a little bit, but let's see. We're talking about the way this is supposed to work. So right after she came out and made this announcement, 2 days later, what is this? The sheriff, what county is Albuquerque in? I don't know much about New Mexico, but this is a county sheriff. I think he's a county sheriff where Albuquerque is. Maybe Albuquerque is the name of the county. I'm pretty sure it's not. Forgive my ignorance. I didn't do a ton of research on the particulars of this, but it doesn't matter. But she came out and she made this statement that you're not allowed to carry a concealed weapon in public. You're also not allowed to carry you're not allowed to open carry in public either. Everybody with a brain knows that she doesn't have the authority to do this. Everybody with a brain knows that this is an unconstitutional order, and that anybody who enforces it is opening themselves up for civil liability. So you have people like this guy here. Oh, it's Bernalillo. I'm not good with words. I don't speak English good. This county right here, Sheriff John Allen, great name. I can pronounce that. He came out and said, no, this is stupid. We're not going to enforce it. There was also multiple mayors and police chiefs who also came out and said, no, this is stupid. This is unconstitutional. We are not going to enforce it. Then the next thing that happened is a federal judge temporarily blocks portions of the New Mexico governor's gun ban. And this is just kind of the point that I want to get at, and I want to drive home to people. When they say, when you as a police officer are faced with a law that is unconstitutional, would you enforce it? And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say, if it's truly unconstitutional, it should never get to the point where I do have to enforce it. And if it gets to the point where I am enforcing that law, it's probably already faced some constitutional tests, and I'm not the one that gets to make the decision on whether or not it's constitutional. So first you had the sheriff come out and say he's not going to enforce this law or this executive order. And then you actually had a federal judge come out and block it from occurring. The same thing happened in Columbus, Ohio, where I happen to live. The mayor and city council and the city attorney, they put out this ordinance that says, you can't have a magazine over 30 that can hold over 30 rounds of ammunition. You have to have your guns locked up, and also had I don't know. I can't remember some of the other. There was like 4 main points for it, but it's actually the Attorney General of Ohio took it to federal court and haven't had an injunction. Actually, I don't think it's federal court. I think it's just a local county court. But there is an injunction placed where that law cannot be enforced until an entire case can be heard. Something like that. So that law never got to the point where I will ever have to enforce it. I don't have to worry about it. Therefore, the question of would you enforce an unconstitutional law kind of becomes a moot point, because if something is actually unconstitutional on its face and it makes it through the legislature and the executive branch, it should be stopped by the judicial branch before it gets to me. That would be the goal. That's exactly what's happened here. That's what happened with me locally. And I would hope that similar laws face the same kind of test, hurdles, what have you going forward. So when people ask me if I would enforce an unconstitutional law, the assumption that I'm going to have to make is that if a law gets to the point where I have to enforce it, it's already faced that constitutional test. And I want to use this kind of as the example that there's already a screen, a net, a safety system put in place to prevent these unconstitutional orders from making it down to where police officers have to enforce them. I think that's it for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.